Hello everyone, I am really excited today. I am going to be doing a tutorial for the Lacey loop tee by Other Loops. I'm going to be using Eddie Bauer's Adventurer Cotton Held Double because for this project you're going to need yarn that is DK weight. So whether that's 2 strands of fingering yarn or a DK yarn. I have also though seen on Ravelry some people are just using a single strand of fingering. Obviously you would need to adjust your needle size, and then some people are using worsted weight as well. So really I feel like if you do a gauge swatch, then you may be able to use any type of yarn. I don't know yet if this is that type of pattern. So here are some notes that I have on this pattern so far. So in the pattern, one of the yarn choices it calls for is Knitting for Olive Pure Silk Held Double. I'm going to be using the Eddie Bauer Adventures Cotton Held Double. You're going to need US size 6 and a US size 4 knitting needles and size 32 inch, 40 inch. This particular shirt is looking for a positive ease of about 10 to 12 inches. So this is meant to be oversized. Now, I haven't knit this before. This is my first time. What I am going for is maybe that 10, 11, 12 inch positive ease. My bust is a 39 inch. So I will be knitting a size large. In the circumference part, by now I'm sure you have your pattern printed out right in front of you. If not printed, then you've got it on your tablet and your phone and you're ready and raring to go. I personally suggest printing out a physical copy of your pattern. When we're using our phones or using tablets to follow patterns, especially patterns that have that are maybe a little bit more difficult for us, I always feel like it's a good idea to use pencil and paper. You can make notes on your pattern if you need to. It's also really good to be able to go in and before you even start circling all of your sizes. I've already made a couple of notes on the pattern as well. So we're gonna go through this together. I'm gonna be knitting it at the same time as you are, hopefully. If I find any errors, then I hope to be able to help you navigate your way through them. So with all of that being said, this yarn actually was gifted to me specifically for tutorial use. It is this really pretty buttercup color, and it's so funny because this whole butter colored yarn and yellow yarn and buttercup is like really popular right now, and yellow is one of my favorite colors, so I am really excited about this. I don't know, I think it'll work. I don't know, what do you think? But here we go. Let's grab our needles and get started. All right, so I've got my supplies ready. I'm going to be using my size 4 Lantern Moon interchangeable knitting needles with a 32 inch cable. And I also have my Knitter's Pride size 6 32 inch cable. So I'll be using these as the pattern calls for them. I've got my yarn here. I have 4 skeins of this yarn, and each one is 590 yards. So I have 2,360 yards. So I'm hoping that that'll be enough. I've got my pattern here off to the right. I'm just going over some quick notes that I made. And then something that I always suggest is when you put your pattern, when you get your physical copy of a pattern, put it inside a paper sleeve, and then make a little thingamabobber right here, a little tab with an arrow on it for your rows. And that way, as you are going through your pattern, you can put it right next to the row that you're on. So in case you have to get up and leave your pattern, and maybe you're in the middle of a row, it'll stay right on the row you're working on. And then you do have to stop after every row and move your tab. But it's just wonderful for being able to take that break for a second, move your tab to know exactly which row you're working on, and you'll never lose your place. That is just simply what I recommend when you're following a pattern for knitting something that's, that can be a little bit daunting. When you're working on something, when you have a pattern that you're working on and it's your first time, to take notes on it, to take notes on what you're doing and what yarn you're using and the needles and your measurements and all that good stuff. So I have my notebook here right next to me for any notes I have. My pattern is ready. I'm going to pull my needles out and let's start casting on. All right, so for my size of the pattern, I know how many I have to cast on, and I think I've got a long enough tail here. I'm going to be doing the long tail cast on method. That is my preferred method for just about everything. So I am going to cast on my amount of stitches, which is for the size large, and you cast on your stitches for your size. Something I like to do when I'm casting on a large amount of stitches is to put a pin or a marker around every 20 stitches. And even though I'm counting as I'm casting on, sometimes you can get distracted or someone says something to you or anything can happen. So I like to put those pins as I'm casting on so that I am less likely to lose my place. So I've got all of my stitches cast on with my little light bulb stitch markers in between each 20 stitches. I've got my tail with a little knot here to keep me from getting confused. And the first thing it tells us to do is to break the yarn. So I'm going to leave a little tail here, cut that yarn. And now what we're going to do is we are going to slip the first few stitches onto the right needle. Now, how many stitches that you slip is depending on what size you are knitting. I'm knitting the size large, so I'm going to slip the first 42 stitches on the needle to the right needle, but I'm not going to work them. So I'm just going to hold on to the yarn we just cut, just because it just makes it easier for me to do this. Okay, so I've got my stitches over here, moved to the right hand needle, and I didn't work them. And now it tells us to join the new yarn and knit a certain amount of stitches. So my stitches that I'm going to be knitting are 32. So I'm just joining that new yarn there. Pull the tail down, and I'm going to knit 32 stitches. So I've knit my 32 stitches, and it tells us to turn. We're doing German short rows, so every time it tells us to turn, we're going to be doing a German short row turn. So basically, you knit to the number of stitches that you need to knit to, and it tells you to turn. So this is row 2 that we're still on. So now it tells us to, what it means here is this. We're going to turn our needle. Now we've got our working yarn on the left hand side. We know that's not supposed to go there. So we're going to slip that stitch over here to the right, okay? And then we're going to turn this into 2 stitches by grabbing our working yarn and pulling it all the way back really, really tight. So here was our one regular stitch. We slipped it to this needle and we're pulling all the way around, and we're turning that into 2 stitches. Now as we knit here and we keep going back and forth, we're going to remember when we get to our stitch where there's the 2 stitches there, we're going to knit those or purl them depending on what side we're on. So now we are ready to move our little progress keeper here. So now we're on row 2. Knit to where we joined the new yarn, then we're going to knit 2 and turn. So we're going to do the exact same thing that we just did. We're going to knit to where we joined the yarn, then we're going to knit 2 more stitches, and we're going to wrap and turn. So we are just knitting right now. So remember to hold that tight where we pulled that over, and now we're just knitting to where we attached the new yarn. Now if you're working with cotton, which I think you probably are, maybe you're working with silk, but I want you to remember something. When you're working with cotton, don't pull your yarn too tightly over your needles, because cotton is very unforgiving and you are going to hurt your hands. You're going to give yourself hand fatigue, and it may make you want to give up on this before you even get that far. So keep your tension good, but don't make it too tight, or your hands will not thank you for that. That's just a little tip I've picked up from knitting several cotton tees for the summer and spring months. I really like this color. It's very pretty. I love yellow. Yellow is one of my very favorite colors. It's so happy. So here we're coming up to where we joined the yarn, and I guess I didn't need my little stitch marker here, but that's okay. So I'm going to carefully knit that and pull it down again. Throw that guy off because I don't need him. Now it says to knit 2 more stitches. So 1, 2, and then we're going to turn. So now we are turning our needles again. And you're going to grab that yarn, and we're going to move this stitch over here to the right. Okay, grab that yarn again, and we're going to pull it back, creating 2 stitches there. So you can see, do you see where each one of these legs is originally 2 pieces of yarn? So my stitches are 2 yarns held double. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 here. So we turned that into 2 stitches. Okay, so now we have turned, and now we are going to move to row 3. We're on the wrong side now, and it says to knit 2 and including the last turn. Knit 2 and then turn. So that means we're going to knit 2 where we turned over here, and we're going to knit that turn, and then we're going to knit 2 more. So let's hold that yarn real tight, because this is your wrap and your turn. So now we're just going to knit all the way over to where we just were. Up here to that wrap and turn, and I know which one it is because there is, do you see how kind of hard and stiff that purl bump is? So that's where I turned. So this is my 1 stitch right here. They're so close together, and they're joined by a purlish bump in the back. So we're going to knit 2 there, knit that as 1 stitch, knit 2 more, and then we'll do another wrap and turn. So let's get there. And we are going to knit that one just like it is 1 stitch. So just going right through both of those stitches, knitting it together as 1 stitch. And we can definitely make sure that that's the right stitch, because we can see both sections of that stitch on the back. So we knit to it, and now we're going to knit 2 more. 1, 2, and now we are going to turn our work. We're going to slip this stitch to the right hand needle, grab that yarn, and we're going to pull it back and over real hard and turn this one stitch, turn this one stitch into 2 stitches. And we're holding that together really hard. And so now it's time to move on to row 4. Right side, we're going to knit 2 and including the last turn and then knit 2. So we're going to do the exact same thing that we just did. And then row 5 and 6 tells us to do exactly the same thing as row 3 and 4. So I'm going to go ahead and do exactly those 2 things. And I'm going to meet you back at row 7. So I'll see you there. Okay, I lied. I thought we would do this together one more time. So we're coming up on that spot where we have our double stitch. Can you tell here? All the rest of our stitches slide easily and they're comprised of 2 yarns. This one right here, we have that little connecting guy right there and it's 4 yarns. So we are knitting right up to it and then we're knitting it as if it is 1 stitch. And then we're going to knit 2 more stitches after that. So here we are, and we're going to knit that together. It is 1 stitch now. Now we're going to knit 2 more. And turn. So we're turning our work again, slipping this stitch to the right hand needle. And then hold it for a second and you're going to grab your yarn, pull it back really hard, pull it back hard, and you are ready to move on with your next row. So I've just finished knitting to the last 2 of row 6. So I knit my wrap and turn here and I knit 2, and ending row 6 we turn, we slip, and we pull back and create that other wrap and turn. But now we are going to purl all the way back to our wrap and turn. Then we're going to purl 2 and turn. So this is the first time we're making any indication of a right and a wrong side. So since we're purling here, this is our wrong side of the fabric. So I've just pulled that yarn over real hard. And now I'm pulling it to the front and I'm just going to purl all the way to the previous wrap and turn. And we're going to wrap and turn again, just as it says to do. I hope I'm doing an okay job. I really enjoy making these tutorials because for me, breaking down a pattern and teaching it helps me to understand the pattern better as well. Because you know the best way to learn something is to teach it. So every time I do one of these tutorials, I'm teaching myself the new technique first so that I can do it on camera and help others who might be more visual learners as well. And there are a lot of tutorials out there for different techniques, but sometimes it's just really nice to have a full-on tutorial for what you're knitting that has all of the techniques in one spot so that you don't have to keep toggling back and forth to different videos. So that's what I'm hoping to do with these tutorials, is to help you to be a friend to knit these things with. And yeah, so I hope I'm doing an okay job. You be sure to let me know in the comments below whether or not I did okay. I would appreciate that very much. Oh, and tell me what color you're knitting. Tell me what color you're knitting for this. I'm interested to know. So here we are. We are here to our wrap and turn, and we are gonna purl it together as if it is 1 stitch. Just like that. And now we're going to purl 2 more. 1, 2, and we're going to turn. We're turning to our right side of the fabric. and we are turning. So we're going to take this stitch that I knit and bring it to the right hand needle. And now we're going to take our yarn and we're going to kind of yarn over it a little bit, and we're going to pull it real hard, okay? You see that section, that part right there? We're going to pull it real hard so that we can tell that that right here is 2 stitches. So now we are moving on to row 8, which tells us to work just the same as row 4. So we are knitting all the way across to our previous wrap and turn, and we're going to wrap and turn all over again knitwise. And this is our right side of our fabric. So I've got that pulled over nice. That's my wrap and turn right there. And I've got it pulled nice and tight. And now I'm just going to keep knitting. Now, like I said, this is row 8, but we are knitting it as just as we did row 4. So we're just doing the same thing that we've been doing. And I noticed right here, my yarn is spliced. So I'm just going to fix that. There we go. So I'm just going to get all the way to the end over here. And I will do the same type of wrap and turn, the same wrap and turn that we've been doing once we get over here again. Okay? I will see you there shortly. So here we are again. We are almost there to our previous wrap and turn. Just going to knit to it, and we're going to knit it as if it's 1 stitch. And we're going to knit 2 more. 1, 2, and now it's time to wrap and turn again. So we're going to turn, move that stitch over here to the right hand needle, and we are going to pull it all the way over to create 2 stitches. And we're going to pull that nice and tight. But now we are pulling our yarn back in front again because this is our wrong side row, and we are going to purl all the way across to our next wrap and turn. So we are currently completing row 9. So this is row 9, but we are doing, sorry, gotta pull my yarn. So this is row 9 that we're purling, and we're doing it exactly as we purled across row 7. So we're making this big area here, and we're really not touching the shoulder areas at all yet. So I'm just moving those forward. And I'm excited to get to the part where we start putting the pattern in here. I think it's going to be really, really pretty. Very excited for that. So I will see you at the wrap and turn. All right, so we're back here to our wrap and turn. As you can see right here, see how that stitch is different than the other stitches. So we're purling up to it, purling that stitch. We gotta get underneath there. Gotta get underneath both of them. There we go. Purling that stitch as if it's 1. Purl 2 more to close that gap. And now we're wrapping and turning. And this is gonna be where we start our pattern. So here we are. We have to wrap and turn before we get started. So we just turned, and we're gonna move this stitch over here to the right, and we're gonna wrap it over. So we've yarned over and we're pulling it really tight here. So now we're on row 10. So if you're having problems recognizing your wraps and turns, absolutely mark them with a stitch marker. Okay, that is the best way so you won't miss them. All right, here we are, friends. We are now on row 10. I apologize in advance. I have a boo-boo, and my nails are looking kind of rough, but that's okay. We're going to keep going. So row 10. On our previous row, we turned right here with our German short row. And now row 10 says we're going to knit 2, 1, 2, yarn over and knit 2 together and repeat up to the last turn. So this time we're not knitting the last turn as included. So I just want to take a minute real quick. We have to pay attention to the pattern because on some rows she says knit 2 and including the last turn. And then on some rows she says knit 2 until the last turn, but she doesn't say including. So on here on row 10, we're going to yarn over and knit 2 together all the way until the last turn. So let's do that. So we are yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, and don't split your yarn. Yarn over, knit 2 together. Nice little reminder here to, if you see these little spots where you've split your yarn, go ahead and put them back. Remember not to pull your yarn too hard, too tight when you're doing all your knitting, because cotton yarn is just not as forgiving and as bouncy as wool yarn. Yarn over, knit 2 together, keep splitting that. Yarn over, knit 2 together. And I'm going to do this all the way till we get to our previous German short row. So I will see you there in just a moment. Here we are. We're going to yarn over, knit 2 together, and we are right here at our previous wrap, and we put the little thing here. And so now it says to knit 3 and then turn. So we're going to knit this one just like it's 1. So 1, 2, 3, and now we're going to turn. So let's turn our work. Pull that stitch over here to the right hand side, and then we're going to wrap all the way over until we make it a double stitch right here. And now this is row 11. We're working the same as row 7, which means we're purling across all of our stitches, including the yarn overs. So I am just going to put my little stitch marker back here to help me. So I'm pulling that yarn really tight, making that double stitch, and I'm going to purl all the way across, making sure that I am also purling the yarn overs. We're almost to the end of this first section, the end of the first repeat of our pattern that we're going to be able to see, which is really nice. I hope you guys are knitting along with me, and I hope I'm doing an okay job explaining things. Oh. And I hope you can see me all right. I'm kind of sitting at an odd position here at my desk. I hope I've got the camera zoomed in to where it's not too far, but also not too close. So row 11, we're going to continue purling all the way over. And row 11 says we work it just like row 7. And so row 7 is we purl up to and including the wrap. So we have to, as we're getting further down here into this section, we have to make sure that we're paying attention to this part of her pattern. So I'm going to take off my stitch marker here. Purling to and including the wrap. And then we're going to purl 2 more. 1, 2, and now we're turning again. So let's turn our work back around, get our yarn situated, and now we're going to take this stitch right here, bring it over here to the right, and then we're going to kind of yarn over and pull just like that. So we have another double stitch. And then let's mark that with our stitch marker again. Just makes it easier to find. So I'm going to move my marker down. We're now on row 12. Row 12 says we're going to knit 3, then yarn over. So make sure you're holding that yarn real tight since we just wrapped. We're going to knit 3, 1, 2, 3. All right, we are here 3 stitches before our last turn. So now we're going to knit 2 together, and we're going to knit 4. So 1, and I'm going to take this off because we're going to knit this as 1 stitch. 2, 3, 4. And now we're doing our German short row again, just as before, just as every time. So we're turning our work, and we are pulling it over to the right, and then we're just going to wrap over, turning that into a double stitch, pull it back here around, and I'm going to put my light bulb stitch marker on here. Carefully. There we go. And now we are on row 13. And row 13 is to work just as row 7, and we're going to purl all of our yarn overs. Row 7 is purl 2 and including the last turn. So we are just purling all the way across, and we're purling that turn. So make sure you purl your yarn overs. Make sure you're not splitting your yarn. And I will see you back here for the next row. We are back here at the end of row 13 where it says to purl 2 and including our last German short row stitch. So here we are, and I'm going to take my light bulb stitch marker off, and I'm purling these 2 together as 1 stitch. And then it says to purl 2 and turn. 1, 2. Now we're turning again. And we're going to grab this last stitch here, pull it over to the right hand side, Then we're going to yarn over and pull it real hard and tight. Well, I'm going to leave it like that for just a minute so I can put my stitch marker in. And now I'm going to pull it real hard and tight. So we are now on row 14. And row 14 says to work it just like row 4. Row 4 says to knit 2 and including the last turn, and then knit 2. So we're just going to knit all the way across to our last turn. We're going to knit it, knit 2 more, and turn again. And this is row 14. So here we are, we can see some of our pattern now. So it's sort of an eyelet row that's offset, and it looks just like it does in the pattern picture. And I am very happy about that. I will say that this pattern is a little bit confusing. I've had to stop a few times and read the pattern out loud to myself and read it out loud very slowly so I can make sure that I'm getting it properly. And I will even be real with you. When I first did the 2 eyelet rows, they were both right under, they were right underneath each other. So I realized that I had made a mistake in row 10, and so I had to pull out and really read it and start over again. And that's where I realized that I needed to circle in red the parts where it says knit 2 and including, and then knit 2 until, because in my Claire brain I hadn't noticed that. I didn't really notice the difference between those 2 instructions, and so I had messed up. But we are on the right track now, and I hope you are on the right track with me, because this t-shirt is going to be so cute. We are all going to look amazing in it. So we're almost there. It is going to be hot girl summer for all of us. Absolutely. And I hope very much so that you will enjoy or have enjoyed knitting this with me. So we're purling up 2. I'm sorry, this is called knitting. We're knitting up 2 and including that last wrap. And now we're going to knit 2 more. 1, 2. Now we're turning again. I hope you didn't just hear my stomach growling. We're pulling it over, flipping it real good all the way over and making that double stitch. And then I'm going to put my stitch marker in it again. And now we are on row 15. We are working just as row 7. Row 7 is to purl 2 and including the last wrap. So we're going to just go on ahead and purl on over. And I'll see you at the end of row 15. So we've purled up 2 and including our last wrap. Now we're purling 2 more. We're turning. Switch it over, and we're turning that into a double stitch here. Okay, and this is row 16. Row 16, we work row 16 exactly as we worked row 4, which is we just knit all the way up to and including the previous wrap, and then we're going to turn again. So as we turn, we do this last turn, we're going to be starting all the way at the beginning again. So I will see you at the end of this row before we start all over again. God, isn't that so pretty? It's coming out so lovely. I am very proud of us, and I'm very excited. I hope you are too. So let's get all the way over to the end, and then we'll talk again. So here we're at the end of row 16. We worked up to, and we're going to work including that wrapped stitch. If you need to just sort of move it a bit to grab it, then you do that. Including that last stitch, and then knit 2 more. Now we're going to turn again. And we are wrapping again, pulling it over just like that to create that double stitch. And I'm going to put my stitch marker on here. So let's talk about these next instructions. Okay, so we are starting all over again, but we're not doing row 1 and row 2 as they are because we're not joining any new yarn and we're not knitting up to where we have any new yarn. So it says that we're going to be knitting row 1 and row 2 are going to be basically row 3 and 4. So we're going to start right here, and we are going to work exactly the same as we worked all the way down to our new row 16. And so we're going to work all the way down to where it says our last row is going to be of the chart. And basically we're going to end up working all of the stitches on either side of our fabric. So by the time we get to the end of our fabric here, then you'll have worked however many rows. So it says for my size that my last row will be row 11. And it also tells us how many centimeters we should measure our mid back from the cast on edge. And so we'll worry about the rest of these instructions after we've done all of this all over again. So we're starting right back here on row 3 on our wrong side. And so we're going to be we're just doing some garter stitch now. So even though we're on our wrong side, we're knitting. We're going to knit 2 and including that previous wrap, and we are just going to keep going. So I'm going to keep going, and I think I might chime in here every few rows or so just to kind of check on you, show you what mine is turning out to be doing, and make sure that we're all getting along. All right, I hope that sounds good. I hope that you have kept up, and I hope that you've enjoyed this. So here is our beautiful fabric we're making. So let's keep going. So we've knit up to our last wrapped stitch, and I'm going to take this off, and we're going to knit including it, and then now knit 2 more stitches. 1, 2. So now we're going to turn, move this stitch over here, And now because we are starting, we're pulling this over to create the double stitch, and let's go ahead and mark that with a marking marker. Oh my goodness, mark it with a stitch marker. Now because we are starting row 3, and even though we're working on a wrong side, we're doing our garter ridge now. So you don't need to pull that yarn back in front to do those purls. So now we are on row 3, and we're going to knit up to and including the last turn. So I just finished row 3 and I'm on row 4, and we're just going to keep going until we get all of our stitches from our cast on worked. Every last one of them. So see how our garter stitch row is going to be turning out here, just like here above. It's going to be so pretty. All right, I'm going to keep going, and then I'm going to pop back in here at row 10 again so that we can do that yarn over row again together. All right, see you then.
And Grindelwald wants to kill Dumbledore because Dumbledore believes that magic, that wizards and witches should live in harmony with muggles. But Grindelwald wants to take over.
We did our first section, and then I did a whole other section here, and I am about to start the last eyelet section of our German short rows. And I wanted to come in here and give you a quick reminder that when you're doing row 1 through 16 of the pattern, always remember that when you finish 16 and you start up here at row 1 again and row 2, you're sort of doing these rows twice. Don't forget row 1 and row 2. So row 1 through 6, you're doing just 6 rows of garter stitch to get that 3-row ridge, or that ridge of 3 here. And then you start on the purling. And also, don't forget that when we are on row 10 and row 12, we're knitting 2, then starting yarn overs. And then on row 12, we're knitting 3 and then starting yarn over. So we're also knitting until the last turn and then knit 3, and then knitting until 3 stitches before the last turn, knitting 2 together and knitting 4. So row 10 and row 12 are completely different than everything else. So don't forget when you're going through your pattern to make sure you're reading row 10 and row 12 properly. So once we finish getting, once we finish getting or using up all of our edge stitches, once we get them all into the fabric, then we start just continuing going down the back for now. And it says that you'll have worked, once you get all of these stitches worked, you'll end on a certain row of the chart. Just go ahead and we're going to do 30 rows of the same 30 rows of the pattern over and over again, except we're not using any German short rows. So what I'm going to do for that, because I have ADHD and I am very visual and also incredibly forgetful, is I'm just going to put a sticky note here, and I'm going to put like back rows, and I am just going to write 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm just going to keep track of my back rows until I get to row 30. Otherwise, I will have no clue where I am if I have to put it down or get back up. I'll tell myself I'll remember, but I won't, and I will be completely useless. So I am going to continue picking up. I'm on row 10 now, so I'm going to just continue row 10 and then row 11, and I'm just going to keep using up all of my stitches, and then I'll meet you back here before we start our back rows. Just keep purling, just keep purling. What do? We purl, we like to purl. When you want to purl, we've got to purl. Just a little bit of wonderful, relaxing music for you to enjoy yourself by. All right, so I finished my short rows, and it says to measure your work. So mine should be approximately 13 centimeters, and I'm 14 centimeters. I'm not worried about it. It is close enough for me. So now we just continue with row 12, row 13, 14, 15, and 16, and we're just going to keep going for 30 more rows. And if you're like me, make sure you tick off your rows. I just do, instead of doing ticks, because I get confused, I just write the row. So I'll start with writing, after I'm finished with row 12, I always write the tick or write down the row after I've done it. So I'll write 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and then I'll go back again and just keep going for 30 rows. Okay. And it tells us what the last row of the chart will be for us. And again, I'm going to say if that doesn't line up for you, you just continue following the chart. That's what you need to do. All right, I'll see you in 30 rows. All right, so we're back. And if you're back, it means that you've finished your 30 rows and we're ready to move on. So our pattern gets a little weird here if you're like me, and it was a little difficult for me to understand. So once we finish our 30 rows, it tells us right here what the last row that we completed should be. Based on that last row is whether or not you are going to work your increased stitches in row 1 and 2, or whether you're going to work them in row 10 and 12. Now, if you are knitting the size where your last row was row 9, like myself, then our increase row is row 10 and 12. If any of those other rows are what you landed on for your size, then your increase row is row 1 and 2. And so now we are going to continue increasing until we get to the stitch count that's provided below here. So we are going to continue working in the chart just as we have, and you are going to increase. If your last row was not ending on a 9, then you are going to do your make one left and make one right increases on row 1, and then you just work a regular row 2, which is just knitting. And if your row stopped, if your knitting stopped at row 9, which would be for the large and I think this extra small and small, then we do our increase rows on row 10 and 12. Okay, so that being said, we're going to do those. And so if you're working on row 1 and 2 for increasing, then you are going to do that this number of times until you get to a certain amount of stitches. Okay, and I am going to do my increases on row 10 and 12 until I get to that same amount of stitches. And then when we get there, we should be at the row here that's in the chart. I just want to apologize. I've lost my mic here. So I am now making a left leaning increase. So I knit 2, and now I'm going to make 1 left. And I just sort of catch that yarn and come around to the back. And now I continue on with the row, which is yarn over and knit 2 together all the way to the end of that row to the last 2 stitches. And that is my first increase row on row 10. So here I am at the last 2 stitches. And now I am going to make an increase again. And I am going to make a right leaning increase. So I'm going to go up and under. And then I'm going to hold that yarn there in the front, kind of pushing it a little bit so that I can knit in it from the front. There we are. And I'm going to knit those last 2 stitches. So that is my first increase row 10. There we are. And now I move on to row 11, which is simply purling all the way across. Now, whenever we're doing our purling rows, remember that our purling rows are just purling. So now I'm halfway through the purling, and I obviously had something important to say here. So I'm just reminding you that once we finish row 11, we come up on row 12, which is our next increase row. And so we will finish all of row 11, and then we'll turn, and 12 is our next increase row. And then we are just going to completely continue with the pattern as usual until we get to our next increase row. And for me, that one first increase row in row 10 is where I stop. So here we go. We're going to knit. And now we're going to make 1 left. Sometimes it's hard to get that needle in there like that. So I like to use my right hand needle to just sort of follow that yarn over the top. And that makes that easier for me. Now that we've done that, we're knitting the first few stitches, just like it says in the pattern. And now we yarn over and knit 2 together. All right, so I have continued my rows, and now I am finished row 9, and I'm on to row 10. Now this row 10 is my last row of increases. So after the increases on row 10 here, I will have 122 stitches. So then I will continue following the pattern until I get to row 15, and then I break the yarn. So you will do just like that. You'll continue the pattern with your increases on whichever rows that you are supposed to do for your size. And then once you've finished making your increases that you need to get to the set number count, then you will continue working until where it tells you the last row for your chart. The last row for you is of the chart, and then you will break the yarn, and she says to let the stitches rest. So here we are, row 10. So I'm going to knit 2, make 1 left, just like that, and then flip over like that. Make 1 left, and now I'm going to yarn over and knit 2 together all the way across. I promise you, I am not going to be using this mic anymore in any of my videos. So I've made it to the last 2 stitches where I'm going to make one right, make one right, and get that in there. And now I am done with my increases, and I am simply going to continue in the pattern. So I am just working on purling row 15 all the way across. And I just wanted to say thank you for joining me for this first part of this tutorial. If you've made it this far, I am so glad. And I hope that I have helped you get through this pattern in some way. I hope that I've helped to maybe make things clear that weren't really very clear. I hope I haven't confused you so much that you've just decided to throw the pattern away and use your yarn for something else. I hope that my voice hasn't annoyed you. And also my chiming in there with little text when I've said something wrong or when I feel like something needs to be reiterated. Basically, I hope this has been a tutorial that has been fairly easy for you to follow. So if it has, I just ask that you would please give me a thumbs up. Please leave me a comment down below if you're enjoying this tutorial, if it's been helpful to you at all. And if it hasn't been helpful, I would really love for you to let me know what I can do going forward for my tutorials to be more helpful. I'm working on trying to learn to edit better, and that's just something that takes time. And I don't have a laptop, so I do all my editing on my phone, so I can't add chapters or anything like that. But if you have tips for me for the future, for future projects, if you have any ideas of tutorials you would like to see in future projects, please leave me a message down below. I will make a list of them and I will knock them out. My thing is, I just never know what people would like to see a tutorial on. I personally don't always knit the, the newest and the coolest of patterns, so I never know what people want to see. And so it's hard for me to make choices of different tutorials to do. But this one was recommended to me by 4 different people, so I knew I had to do it. So Callie and Linda, and I forgot the other 2 names, I'm sorry, but if you're watching this, here you are, and I really and truly hope that I've helped you in some way. I hope that I have been a friend to knit this with and encouraged you. And here we are at the end of row 15. So now it says that we cut our yarn. I'm going to cut our yarn after I've pulled the stitches through the barber cord though. I'm going to put all of my stitches on barber cord while we let the stitches rest like she suggested in the pattern. And then I'll cut my yarn. And if you are ready to start on the next part of the pattern, which is going to be the left shoulder and then the right shoulder and then moving down into the body, then I hope that you will join me in that next video. Here we go. Now pull the barber cord. There we are. Got our stitches on here. And now they're not going anywhere. And I'm going to cut the yarn. And that should do it. That is the upper panel of the back of our Lacey loop tee. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for everything, and I hope to see you in the next video.